That's the hardest part about being an artist, man. When you really fucking care about something and it's not big yet and it's nothing, you're gonna have to care about it and think it's so important when you look freaking ridiculous. And it's just like, it's never gonna be that good unless you think it deserves to be.
From World Within Studios and PRX, you're listening to the How to Change the World podcast. I'm your host, Rustam Zafari. We're back with part 2 of my conversation with Brandon Stanton, the most famous artist you've probably never heard of before. He is the creator of Humans of New York, and his portraits and stories of everyday people have gained over 30 million followers online. But to most of his audience, he's invisible. Today, we speak with the man behind the camera about art, faith, loneliness, perseverance, and what it means to truly see one another. Well, jumping right into it, why are you so obsessed with other people's stories?
Oh, obsessed. Well, in general, I'm just kind of obsessive about anything that I'm doing. So if I'm in a season of my life where I am telling other people's stories, and I tend to obsess over that. Why have I made my living and my name telling other people's stories? I think that starts 15 years ago when I showed up to New York and I just was looking for any sort of lane that would allow me to photograph all day long. It wasn't some big flash of inspiration. It was really a practical consideration. Instagram didn't exist yet. Facebook was just starting to break out of the mode of personal profiles to where you could share stuff outside of your friend groups. It was very early in the social media era. And so I was just looking for a lane. And when you're looking for a lane and you're an artist, the question you ask yourself is, what can I do that's different than everybody else? And not saying that photographing people was a completely new thing, but I noticed that a lot less people at the time were photographing people than were photographing graffiti or buildings. And so I started photographing people. And then I noticed that when I stopped somebody on the street and asked them for their photograph and got sort of an intimate portrait of a stranger, there were very few people doing that. So I was starting to kind of hone in on this style of photography where I'd stop a random person on the street and take their photo. And then I came to New York City for the first time, saw all of these people in such a small place. And that's when the wheels started really turning, that I could really do a special project here where I just documented the inhabitants of New York City. And that's where it began. The storytelling emerged out of just the inherent interactions I was having through the process of stopping these thousands of people and asking for their photograph.
Stopping a stranger and asking them to share confessions or their most vulnerable moment or their weakest moment or what they're suffering in that moment, that seems like a big ask for someone who just met you. How do you build that trust in such a short amount of time?
Well, it seemed like a big ask to me at the time, when I was doing it too. And again, a theme that I'll keep coming back to is that none of it came from a burst of inspiration. It was just all trying to figure it out, being broke, needing an audience to survive. You need an audience to buy your books, to buy your prints. At that time, I just wanted to sell prints. I can't overemphasize that there was no such thing as followers when I started Humans of New York. I had a website. I was hoping people would come to my website. Nobody was coming to my website. So it was just survival mode at the time when a lot of this stuff was being innovated. And, the innovation going from candid shots of people to very intimate portraits of people to people would start saying things, naturally while I was photographing them. And sometimes I would include a quote. And then the quotes I noticed were interesting to people because they differentiated the work even more. Like there were some people that were taking portraits of random people. I don't know if anybody at that time was also adding some of the person's voice. And so I decided to lean further into that area. And so I just started asking them questions. And And like, where did the interview come from, or where did the interview process coming from? It went from me asking one question to learning that I could ask 3 questions. People would give me time to ask 10 questions. Not only that, they would let me ask follow-up questions that were very personal. And I kind of developed a rule early on, is that there's nothing I won't ask. I'll just ask. If they don't want to tell me, that they don't have to tell me. Through that experimentation, I learned that it was possible, not only possible, but commonplace, to be able to stop a random person, introduce yourself, because I didn't have 30 million followers back then. I was just a guy asking questions. But still, the process didn't feel that much different back then. In a short amount of time, a rapport and a comfort level was developed on the street that made that person feel comfortable enough to share very personal, authentic, real, honest, shameful sometimes, things they felt guilty about, aspects of their lives with a complete stranger.
Why is it so critical to include someone's voice? I mean, you could just settle the photograph like most people were doing. Like, what does bringing someone's voice add to the dimension of the storytelling?
Well, I mean, I think, some people would say it detracts from it. This is where you kind of get into taste and, the role of mystery versus candor. Some people prefer the portrait, and they prefer that little moment of mystery where they can fill in their own story about the person. For me, I just always wanted to know more. And I think a lot of that's just, my personal curiosity. And I think that's why I am such a relentless interviewer, is that I want to understand. And if you're obfuscating, or you're, getting around the heart of the matter, I will keep asking you to be more and more and more specific with your answers until I understand what you're trying to say. And there's something kind of adversarial in that about the interview. But at the same time, people are so used to nobody caring, or nobody listening to them, or only listening to them in order to get to the point where they get to give their thoughts or their opinions. And to have somebody, even if it's kind of in a relentless or adversarial way, take such an interest in your life and give you such credibility that they're not going to let you off the hook, and they're going to keep coming back and asking harder and harder questions. There's something so powerful about having somebody take that deep of an interest in your life that they're not going to let you off the hook, that I think the impetus to participate and the impetus to help that person try to understand you is so strong that, I've been really reflecting on how to wield that power in an ethical way.
It's such an interesting question that, how do you become a good steward of that person's story? Because it's sacred to them. It's their life. It's their identity.
Right.
I can, attest to this because of the interviews with my grandfather.
Right.
About being relentless. I feel like I knew my grandfather more than anyone. Mm-hmm. And then I watched you ask him the same question 10 times in a row, and the first 9 times you got the same answer. The 10th time something happened.
Right.
And every time I told you, I was shocked. It's like, how do you know that's going to happen? I didn't know that. He didn't know that, but you knew that. When you were on that search for truth, for understanding, how do you know when to move on to the next question? How do you know that when an answer isn't quite as complete or as fulfilling as it could be?
Truth just makes sense. Like, truth just makes sense. It's like, if somebody, and it's not that they're being dishonest with me. We're dishonest with ourselves all the time. Our memories are screwed up. It's just like, it's memories also something in this season of my life that I've been thinking about a lot. You interview 10 different people about the same event. You get 10 different versions. If somebody has decided that their mother was a bad person, the mind very interestingly will start to assimilate itself to support that narrative. It will begin to forget the memories that discount that, and begin to buttress and support the memories that affirm that. And so many of our memories and our experiences of people are, the curation of memories that support narratives and judgments that we've already made about those people. It's another interesting thing. And so it's like the way that we live our lives, a lot of times even obscure truth from ourselves in the way that our minds work. So a lot of the interview process is not me trying to figure out how the person's lying to me. And lying's even too strong of a word because that implies something conscious. You know what I mean? It's more me just trying to peel back layers and layers and layers of what happened until it makes sense, and until it's like, oh, okay, I can understand that. And a lot of times that process, like, I'll just repeat somebody's words back to them. Like, what exactly do you mean by that? What exactly do you mean by that? Even just asking, even just pushing people to explain their feelings with greater and greater specificity, is a uncovering process. Again, the only goals being for me to understand. From the outside, that takes the appearance of a very structured interview designed to create a story from the person's, what they told me. But, I think the reason it's so hard to replicate, and the reason it's hard to teach, is because all of it was layered on top and built upon and put in service of a very strong desire just to understand each person that comes in front of me, and a curiosity about them.
I guess I have a question on like what's made you stick with it this far, right? Like 15 years is a long time. How's the why you do it? How has that evolved for you?
Well, it's like I never survived with the why. I never, this is where James Clear, Atomic Habits, I've been living that since day one. Is you don't rise, I'm going to butcher it, sorry, James. Like, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the levels of your habits. So it's like, it wasn't this huge, mission that was pulling me forward and getting me out of bed every single day. It was just discipline. I was just a very, very disciplined person that I am going to get up and I'm going to do my work every single day. I wouldn't take a day off because I knew how hard the work is. One, it's like, one of the reasons Humans of New York is difficult to replicate is because it's very difficult to create. It's hard to go out there and stop 20 random people on the streets of New York City every single day and ask for their photograph, in different neighborhoods and go different weather all across the city. It's a lot of negative energy that you're dealing with. Some beautiful moments, don't get me wrong, but you have to wade through a lot to get there, both in miles walked, people approached, rejections, sometimes aggressive rejections, absorbed, long interviews that you spent 45 minutes and you walked 5 miles, finally found a person that said yes, and then you do a hour interview that just doesn't quite get there. Person just doesn't quite ever open up, and then you're back to square one, and now the sun's going down. It's 4 or 5 p.m. You worked all day. You got nothing. You haven't posted yesterday. There's nothing to do. It's all on you. It's hard to get out there and do it every single day. And what kept it going through this 15 years was just the discipline of I was always going to do it. And then all of the beautiful intellectual stuff that's so fun to talk about, like the interview process and the writing and the editing and how do you make somebody feel comfortable and what do you look for in a photo, the composition, the light, all of that intellectual stuff didn't come from study. It just came from the discipline and doing it and just getting incrementally 0.0001% better every single day. But it's like the only thing that I could really control, and therefore the thing that I just always fell back on, is I knew I was going to be the guy that got up and did it every day when I didn't feel like doing it. And there's very few of those people in this world. And if you can be one of those people, you'll get there. It might not be the version that you were imagining and dreaming about. But if you pick your lane and you care about it and you said, you know what, I'm not going to identify myself by the amount of applause I get. I'm not going to judge myself by the amount of money I make. I'm going to judge myself by doing it. I'm a writer. If I wake up and I write my 3 hours every day, I'm a writer. I don't give a shit what the New York Times says. I don't give a shit what my parents say. I don't give a shit. Like, if I'm doing it every single day, that's what I am. And then that's what you commit yourself to. That's the one torch I have to carry. That's all you have to do. You don't have to worry about your commas, your sentence structure, your grammar. You don't have to worry about your promotion. The one torch you have to worry, you got to do your writing every single day. You got to do your photography every single day. That's what carried me through a lot of doubt, a lot of loneliness, a lot of feeling crazy. When you really fucking care about something and it's not big yet and it's nothing, and you have to care about it so hard when people are laughing at you, really. Because people will laugh at you until it's big. 99% of people can't judge something on its merits. They will clap for you when other people start clapping. They're not going to tell you, yeah, this thing you're doing that nobody's paying attention to, that has no lane to profit, but hey, that's a great idea. You keep doing it. No, that comes later when they all start talking afterwards about how, they always knew it was a great idea. Yeah, this guy was always something special. It's just like in the moment, to build something big, to build something great, you're going to have to care about it and think it's so important when you look freaking ridiculous for thinking it's that important. You have to look ridiculous. You have to care about it and think it's so important long before anybody else agrees. And that is the thing that only discipline is going to get you through. Because you're not going to get the affirmation. If you're coming at it needing that affirmation from the outside world, you're going to run out of steam way before you get there. Here's the other thing too. That's what saves you when you start to get famous. It's the same thing. It's what gets you there, and it's what saves you when you start to get famous. Because everybody who started out for the applause, once they get the applause, they stagnate. They just start going sideways. They start playing it safe. They start repeating the thing that gets them. They stop taking risks, and that's why the one-hit wonder is such a famous thing. The only thing that you can control is doing the work every single day. And it doesn't always have to be the same thing. It's not like I just photographed. It's for a long time, for years, I was going to interview 4 people and I was going to get 4 photographs every single day. And I did that for years. But then when I wanted to start getting better at my writing, I wanted to read my 100 pages. I started studying other people who were great at writing, and I knew that was a big part of it. So I was going to read my 100 pages a day, did that for years. I was going to work on my writing every single morning. So you don't have to stay at the same input every single day. That can change. The key thing is that whatever it is that you're doing in this season of your life, if you're a stay-at-home mom, it's like my wife is a PhD, world-class, elite, Fortune 500 level expert at our household about all our kids being taken care of, it being a happy, loving, nurturing environment. And that's because she shows up every single day. It doesn't matter what it is. What it matters is that if that's going to be your identity, you judge your success at that by what you're putting into it every single day and not what's getting validated.
Yeah, one of my friends daily, he's like the best advice I have for everyone is like show up every day.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Of the advice that you give people, because you travel, you speak, what's the hardest advice that you give for you to follow yourself?
Oh, that's a great question. We're talking about maybe it's the same advice. It's just like focusing on what you control and what you put in every single day. And when you have 3 kids, all under the age of 7, and you really want to be a good dad, and that's like really important to you, the amount of time that you have to control what you can control with your career gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And even though I am controlling it just as much as I used to. The forward movement is a lot less because I don't have as much bandwidth as I used to. And reaching that same level of self-forgiveness that I prescribe to other people, where as long as you're doing what you can every single day, you are succeeding to the maximum of your abilities, despite what the outcome is. The fact is that I'm a damn good dad. I really am a damn good dad. And because of that, I'm not as effective of an artist as I used to be. That might, you can even hear me being hard on myself there. Maybe that's not the right word. Maybe effective's not the right word. Prolific. How about that? I'm not as prolific of an artist as I used to be. And that is something I wrestle with.
And maybe it's because it's not that you're less of an artist, but you're more of a person. You're more of a father. Your dimensions have expanded to include more responsibilities, not less. But I think it's also interesting to me that now you probably can do something with a phone call that would have taken you 3 months to do back then, right? So I think that's true too. Like, not only the craft, but the network, the reputation. Like, doors open now that you would have dreamed of opening.
Well, that I would always ignore, though, to be honest. Yeah. And like 26, like I used to say, I went to 5 different Met Galas, 5 in a row, maybe 6, like 5 years in a row. And I had the run of the place. I could stay for the concert, the dinner. I could do whatever I wanted. I was always the first person to leave. Like the probably most desirable networking event in the country. Every year, the billionest of the billionaires and the most famous of the famous, they all get together, and I was always the first person to leave because I wanted to get home. I wanted to edit my photos. I wanted to get 8 hours of sleep, and I wanted to go work the next day. You know what I mean? And so it's like I turned down everything except for the work. I was very purist about it. Very purist about it. If your work's going to be successful because of a hand that you shook, maybe it doesn't deserve to be successful. You know what I mean? Naval has a quote that I love, is that, it's do good enough work and your network will appear. But it takes a lot of faith. It takes a lot of faith because that's not always true. It's really not. There are some beautiful artists out there that never got discovered because they were too early, they were too late. Really, the only compass you can use as an artist, unless you want spiritual death, is you create based on what you love, and you always change, you always evolve, but always along the lines of how can I love it more? How can I like it more? And you get these very interesting people with very niche interests that like somebody emailed me recently. The guy took a picture of 10,000 clocks. I don't know. For every second of the day, he took a picture of a different clock around the world. And so like he spent years, I think he took time off his job to make this collection of like thousands and thousands of clocks. And it's this website, and you can just keep hitting the over button. And for each second of the day, he'll just show you a different actual clock that he photographed around the world that shows that second. And like, that was his labor of love. And, it's really interesting. If you wanted to, you could really, write an essay on the relationship between time and space and how this man explored it in some sort of deep way. And it certainly took a lot of love but that is a difficult piece of art to consume. There are a lot of very, very, very talented people that make very beautiful things that might not be quite consumable enough. Yeah, it's not, a silver bullet that if you just keep, I used to talk about it as it was, you know what I mean? This is part of growing older. You just always realize that there's so many exceptions, and that, certainty can be unkind because there's always somebody that it won't work for that's made to feel bad if you say that it'll work for everybody. They're made to feel like they're doing something wrong when they're not, you know?
That's why one of my favorite books of all time is by another Brandon Sanderson.
Who we both love.
Way of Kings.
Yeah.
Also incredibly disciplined. And, he talks about not being prescriptive with a certain journey, but it's the way you walk it. Yeah. And I think certainty of a path will only lead to friction, but a commitment to a way of being is much more interesting.
I like that.
Right. And so, it's also much more true to our nature. Like it organically feels right.
Right.
But you talk about like this artist who, took these photographs of these clocks, and there's a bit of that makes me feel of, some of the work you do with Humans of New York, in that there's times where you pursue things that are important to you, and there's times where you have to pursue things that are priorities for your audience. And there's this balance of what your audience wants, and we'll react to what the social media more than your audience, even the algorithms respond to. There's what Humans of New York is known as now, its current iteration. And then there's that other piece, which is kind of what your heart pulls you towards, which might be where Humans of New York goes in the future. And so, and a great example of this is, your short form versus long form. Like initially you were riding the tailwinds of social media, and more recently you've done posts like Tangeray or Bub John or other things, which are, 20,000 plus word pieces on Instagram, which no one's else is doing that. Like that's a decision you made. So how do you balance what you want to create as an artist, what feels true, like following that fulfilling yearning of your heart versus what algorithms will respond to?
One of the questions I always ask people, and I always check in with myself on this, is how do you keep score with yourself? Because life is like a decision tree, and there's just so many decisions to be made all the time. And so that question, how do you keep score with yourself, is like, okay, if there are two decisions or two paths, if you're at a fork in the road and the road they both seem very equal, ultimately you have to choose between them. And with all other things being equal, you choose the path that leads to more what? For some people, it's money. For some people, it's fame. For some people, it's joy. For some people, it's relationships, community. But it's important for you to know for yourself, what it is that you're optimizing for, to give your life some sort of form and structure and body so that you are moving in a direction. The world has gone so much more to video. The algorithms have changed massively for everyone. And the ways and the certain types, what used to be consumable art might not be consumable anymore. Do I measure only for what I am most interested in, even if that means that less people see it? You could be a purist and say that, oh yeah, that's all that matters in art. Or you can say art is a conversation. The art is an act of transformation, and the amount of people that do see something matters. And so therefore, I am going to make art in a certain lane that will reach people. And that today is video. So, I think the question that you asked is something that, I'm at this moment sitting with, is that I know I can make damn good videos because the interview is so powerful. And the interview carries. You can do the interview in podcast. You can do the interview in video. You can do the interview as I do it now in text and photos. It's reaching the point where I'm having to ask myself, is my enjoyment of that specific medium serving me? Or do I value more the impact that my art has? The minds changed, the conversation started, sometimes the money raised. And if that is more important, do I need to start taking the elements of my art that I value that will work in other mediums and bring it over there, and then start getting good at the elements of those mediums that I'm not currently good at? There's never certainty at any time. of exactly what I should be doing. It's all, again, just show up and do the work. I'm about to go back to New York, moving back in June. Get back in the streets, get my hands in the clay every single day after 2 years of really honing down into this book. And if, the pattern repeats as it has repeated in the past 15 years, several different times, I think the next lane will organically emerge.
I feel like spending 2 years writing, your life story, some patterns might emerge that you might not have noticed before. What did you learn about yourself that you didn't know going into writing the book? Was it more like, is a history, exercise where you knew all the moments, memories, or was there kind of insights that came out that surprised even yourself?
This is conceived to be a book, and therefore all the material was gathered for the book. So that meant, so many days of photography, months and months and months of photography that were not ever published. So that was a huge part of the stepping back process. Then there is this 8,000 word prelude, which is, I can't say, maybe your grandfather's story is the hardest I've ever worked on a piece of writing, but if not, this was the second hardest I've ever worked. And so it was like, it was that process. I would say it's about me, but it's not. It's not the severe, soul searching, soul bearing that a memoir would necessitate. To me, it was a risk of, I'm going to disappear for 2 or 3 years and try to make the best possible thing that I ever have made, something that would have a higher chance of enduring. And so you trade off the constant connection with the audience, the constant publishing that will be ephemeral because the whole nature of social media is ephemeral, in the hope of creating something that's going to be enduring, with the risk being that it's not enduring and you disappeared for 2 years. But and then again, that's where I always fall back for my own sanity. Even in my conversations with my publishers, I'm like, all right, well, we know no matter what happened is I could not have worked harder on this. This is the best I possibly could do at the age of 40 with everything that I've learned. I know that I spent 2.5, 3 years working on this book that I cared about and I thought was so important the entire time. Every decision felt so important because this was going to be the book. This is going to be the book. Like, that is the mindset I carried that is the torch I carried all 2.5, 3 years of working on this. And then you release it to the world and you got to be prepared for the world to not think it's as important as you thought. And then that is an ice bath, man. When you really obsess and you really love something for so long with this hope or delusion that the world's going to agree with you, and it does not, that's an ice bath. But then you just get up and you got to do it again. You just got to obsess over something again and just care about it so much and just think it's so important. That's the hardest part about being an artist, man. You have to care about something so hard when it makes absolute no sense from the outside to care about it that much. And it's just like, it's never gonna be that good unless you think it deserves to be. That you are the kind of artist that can create something that good. It deserves to be that good. And the earlier you are in your career, it's just like, the more ridiculous that amount of faith and belief and care and dedication looks in the absence of any external validation. That's definitely the hardest part about being an artist, is just caring so damn much when it looks so damn stupid to care that much. That's where discipline bails you out.
You always talk about discipline and craft and the habit and it's not about mission or you always break it to the nuts and bolts, but when I hear you speak and from just knowing you just seems like someone who has tremendous faith. And I want to talk about faith for a role, because I do agree. My dad would agree too, the general, that the discipline is important. All those things are vital, but you have to truly believe in something if you want to leave a legacy, make an impact, make a difference. Your craft has been an exercise in faith, it seems like. How has faith informed the work? And what does it mean to you to what do you believe in?
For the time Humans of New York was really, really launching. Like I don't know. Maybe AI will figure this out one day. But from the year 2013 to 2015, like Humans of New York was reaching hundreds of millions of people each week. I don't know what other media organizations were reaching that many people. Maybe there were some. I don't know. But like during that period when it was just it was working the best, let's just say. That was self-belief that I was just not going to stop. I was not going to stop until I figured it out. And it was like, that wasn't the hard part. The hard part was when I first moved to New York. And I was just like, I will never quit. I cannot fail. I cannot fail because there will always be something else to try. That sort of self-belief that carried me for a long, long, long way. Then I started getting more religious and more spiritual. I came to God through the gospel. You know what I mean? So in that way, I'm very much a Christian. It was the story of Jesus Christ who brought me to God. I cannot say that I am certain about that. Like the thing that my certainty, and there are moments when that certainty feels less certain, is that there is you can define it however much. I mean, if I was to get as tangible and as logical about it as possible, it's that, like, okay, take everything that science can describe. Everything, the material world, the quarks, the neutrons, the atoms, the solar systems, infinite solar systems being in our galaxy, and infinite galaxies being, obviously infinite's a exaggeration there, being just like every word we have to describe the microscopic nature of something, and just the mass, take all of that, everything. It's that there is something outside of that. Outside of everything that's capable of being measured and described. And that's where that ultimate hubris of the atheist comes in, is that, oh, because I can describe it, I understand it. But like, tell me you had the most brilliant physicist who laughed at religious people, they were the most brilliant one in the world, who just has no place for God in his model. If I was interviewing him, I would be asking him, okay, then what happened before that? Then what came before that? And what came before that? And what came before that? And what came before that? But at some point, if you keep asking that question, the answer that's going to come out is going to be some synonym of the word magic. So there's always, at the beginning of everything, is going to be a question mark, not a period. It's a mystery. This world is full of mystery, and that's beautiful. There's mystery. And humanity has tried to put words to that mystery, Jesus, Allah, so many different stories. Everybody's had their different way of accessing it, and I think it's all valid. I've been all around the world, met people of all different religions, some people of no religions, who I feel are close to God in their own way. So that doesn't matter to me. To me, two things are important, and this is what I believe at this moment, at the age of 41, that there is something else outside of what can be measured, one. And then number two is the big one for me. You can interact with it. You can have a relationship with it. And that's why I think Christianity is so powerful, because I think that's the main message. But where I would probably be banished to hell by a lot of Christians is I don't think it's the only path. There is something that was before everything, one, and two, if you really look for it, it will reach back. If you really reach, it will reach back. And it will happen in different ways for every different person. It's not this single paragraph in this book that's going to be your answer. It's, if you reach and really reach, it will reach back. And so now at this time of my life, again, it's reaching. What is it that which was before everything would like me to use this for? Again, It's not a certainty. It's not an answer that I have. It's a question that I constantly ask. And that is part of this season of my life as well.
This might be the most powerful question someone can ask themselves. Or as Brandon Stanton would say, the most important words a person can say. Wow. I also think when we think of storytelling, no one understands the power of stories more than people of faith. Because no matter what background you come to it with, there's a story that in no small part shapes your life. And
I don't know if it's, I mean, I think you might be giving people of faith a little too, it's like, there's a certain type of faith. Like, so see, some people don't view them as stories. I think most people of faith would just say that's truth. Do you know what I mean? And that's dangerous. And I think really the dangerous part of faith is the certainty that comes in, because with certainty, you stop listening, you stop understanding, you start categorizing us, them, correct, incorrect, true, false. And you start devalue everybody's journey except for that very specific one. And I think one thing that you said is very true is that I think the world's religions do prove the power of stories and the power of stories to propagate and spread and transform and create, like look at the you're going to the Vatican next week. I mean, all of that, that was built upon the story of one man's life, and it turned into a state and this huge organization and billions and billions and billions of dollars. And yes, that all came from a story first.
It also goes back, interestingly enough, to what you talked about earlier about the sanctity of a story and the ethics and what you do with power dynamics. I mean, that is the ultimate, because you see in this country how faith in many countries is twisted. In every country, can be twisted to do horrible things, right? And so that to me can be that dogmatic zealousy, but not in service of love, not in service of mystery, and not in service of people. Yeah, I'm curious actually on that note. Why do you think it is that pain, if you do, that pain connects us more with other people than, let's say, success or achievement or some other marker?
There's something very indivisible about pain, immediately recognizable. You know what I mean? It's like we might not all know what it's like to win $1 million or to be successful or, any of these other more elusive emotive states that you can capture. But we all know what it feels like, or not everybody, but everybody over a certain age, to lose somebody very close to you, to be struggling with an addiction, or to have searing loneliness and isolation or social anxiety. You know what I mean? It's like the struggles in life are more democratic, therefore that they are more easily understood across class, creed, race, and gender. Words separate us, thoughts separate us, there's an infinite amount of opinions and beliefs, but you can argue that there is a singular pain of grief, singular, pain of loneliness. These things are more indivisible.
Loneliness is one that, comes to mind when I think of social media. Because it feels like, I have a younger sibling. I see the way she grew up and versus the way even me. I'm not that much older than her, but it's different the way that my parents grew up, my grandparents, right? And are we getting lonelier as a world? Are we just noticing it more? Like, how do you think why is it that our technologies that are on their websites and on their pitch decks connecting us more than ever, that it feels like we're at a loneliness pandemic?
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, it's like, interestingly, it's funny because I think about community all the time. I don't have a ton of it. It's because, again, for me, it was family and work. One of the truest memes I've seen is that, like, I don't know, it was, he showed like 5 different circles. It said like work, family, friendship, spirituality, health. And it's like, pick 2. You can have 2. You know what I mean? You can be really good at 2. So I chose family and work, and like because of that, I don't have a massive amount of community. I get that from my kids and from my wife, and then from some extent my brother and my parents as well, who live nearby. Um, these phones, and I mean, I'm such a hypocrite for talking about this. My wife can talk about it from a more authentic, credible way, 'cause she's really good about staying off her phone. I talk about how dangerous they are, and then I freaking stare at them a lot, more so than her. Um, yes, it's created all these kinds of substitutes for face-to-face interaction. We think we are replacing through digital equivalents, and it feels like it, to the extent that we almost don't feel like we need to seek those out because we're bombarded by people all day long, or these digital personas of them, that, it's not getting replaced. There's some sort of deficit being created, that is adding up and kind of like creating this sense of isolation. Um, and it's interesting for me to be saying that, and ironic, I guess, in a way, because in so many ways I trailblazed and innovated the possibilities of fostering connection in a digital space. So it's like, all right, well, we're going to spend all our time online anyways, then this is probably the best you can do. But, even are these digital moments, no matter how much of real life is infused into them, a poor substitute for something else.
I guess as we wrap up here, one thing that I wouldn't ask was also like, why do you think we talked about like why you chased stories, but why do you think other people do? There was a talk that Salman Rushdie gave, and his opening line was, humans are the storytelling animal. What do you think it is that makes us the storytelling animal?
Well, I mean, the simple answer is we're the ones, well, I guess dolphins can talk. Dolphins, maybe dolphins are telling stories down there. We don't know that. Well, sometimes wonder if like dolphins are smarter than us, but just in ways that we can't understand. Like, wouldn't that be cool? And it's just like they just don't have hands, and so they can't project their will. So Rushdie calls us the storytelling animals. He calls us the knowledge and knowledge being. So what's the relation if in reality, the power of humans is our ability to gather knowledge and propagate it, then where does storytelling come in on that? And I guess in many ways, stories are like a vehicle to encode something of value, that people can draw from outside of the limitations of space and time. And you can sip from the discoveries made thousands of years ago, or you can sip from the lessons learned 100 years ago, by experiencing them in a consumable form. I guess going back to consumption, what are stories but the most consumable form of knowledge that there is?
That's an incredible answer. It actually reshaped my way of thinking of stories in terms of, one, a vessel for knowledge, but the ability for people to receive it is also related to the beauty of the vessel. I think so much of the stories you've written are stories of people, but over time they emerge patterns and themes of these people living in systems, oftentimes really corrupt systems or broken systems. That's why they're talking to you about these moments of pain, whether it's housing challenges, whether it's criminal justice. And so what have you learned about institutions and system building and system change from the grassroots and from the kind of the lens of the individual?
I think that's a critique that's been leveled against Humans of New York, and a valid one, is that it ignores context. That I will go to the housing projects and speak to a woman about, her pain and her inability to feed her children without backing up and talking about the history of the housing projects, the history of Jim Crow, the history going back to the history of slavery. There's always another level you can zoom out. And I think one critique that's valid about Humans of New York is that in telling first person narratives, you you can create a lot of empathy without an appropriate amount of understanding about why that situation has been created. And so it's like, I learn personally about context as much as I can. But when I'm sitting in front of somebody, I'm not trying to jam context into their experience of their own lives. I want to know how they experience their lives. So it's something that I don't unpeel a lot in my work. It is what it is. And anytime you do something to the best expression of how it can be, there are going to be a lot of people who think that there's a better way to do it. And I think part of maturing as an artist is realizing that criticism is not a sign that you're doing the wrong thing, but can actually be an indication that you're doing the thing that you chose in its best possible expression.
And then the last question I have is around achievement, because so much of your life is dedicated to the pursuit of not just being an artist, but being the absolute best artist that you can be. And having known your voracious routines, whether it's the 10-minute morning cold plunge or the 3-mile daily run or 100 pages of reading a day, one of my favorite things he told me is like you used to like write novels out word per word, the greatest novels that you knew, just to know what it would feel like to pen them. Like no one does that to me who doesn't pursue something like, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say Hunter Thompson did it. I don't want to act like I'm the only person who did it. Hunter
Very
Thompson.
few people I know, but I love that about you. And it's, it reminds me, I mean, you just embody pursuit, right? In a very tangible, special way. My grandfather talks about words with wings, that when you write truly good words and beautiful words, they will spread across the world and be read and touch people's hearts, no matter how long they're buried for, or no matter what the short-term criticism, and over a long enough timeline, those words will fly. For you, what would that look like for your writing, your artist, for your mark to be left the way you would want it to be left?
I sometimes wonder if that's the right way of thinking about something. Say that I write something that in the moment changes your mind about something, and then you start behaving differently towards people. And because you're behaving differently towards people, they're behaving differently towards people. And there's a legacy of those words that is invisible, in that it changed an almost infinite multitude of behaviors through that one mind that you transformed. The ripple effects, the unknown, they cannot be cataloged, they cannot be documented, they can never be known effects of those words in the moment are massive, massive. Would I change my art to reach more people? Well, if you're saying that there's nothing more powerful in the world than a changed mind, because a changed mind leads to changed behavior from now until that person's death, and the accumulated effect of that just cannot be quantified in any possible way, then the answer to that question is yes. You should go to where things can be consumed, because that's where the most minds are that can be changed. That's where the most hearts are that can be changed. And by changing a mind, that's why I think Steve Jobs said that the storyteller is the most powerful person in the universe. If you change a mind, you change everything that person does for the rest of their life.